Okay, 2004 Ford Expedition. We have a 4R70W trans on the bench. Now let me explain to you what is going on with this. All right, first of all, 2004, they started with an input speed sensor, but you can have an early 2004 or an early transmission in a 2004 with no input speed sensor, all right, which is the case here. This does not have the input speed sensor, but this is not the original transmissions. There's all kinds of marking on this because this is a used transmission. All right, I don't have the original transmission. I'm not sure what the problem was with the original transmission, but you got to keep in mind it's a 2004. So they brought it somewhere. I'm not sure where. I think somewhere in maybe Queens or Brooklyn. And they installed a used transmission. And after they installed a used transmission, the speedometer didn't work, it didn't shift, and it had a P0720 and a P0722 output speed sensor circuit. Okay? They put the second transmission in it, and it had the same problem. They put the third transmission in it, and it had the same problem. This is the third transmission, and the second transmission is in the back of the car. All right, so when all that didn't work, they put a brand new output speed sensor in it, and that didn't work. And then they called me. She had brought the car somewhere else. The owner of the car had brought it somewhere else, and the guy says, let me bring it over to AAA. These guys can figure out what's going on. So the guy was kind of telling me, he says, I'm not really sure what's going on. It has a 720 code, has a 722 code, and I asked what year it was. I said it's an 04, and then I was getting some history on the car, and that's when they said, they put all these transmissions in. And I says, all right, well, let me just climb under there first before we start going crazy. Let's make sure that the output speed sensor is plugged in, which it was. Okay, I said, you got to leave the car because we got to see exactly what's going on. So we get the scan tool, we confirm the codes, the 720, the 722, and then we drive the car, me and one of my lead tech, we have the scan tool on it, we're driving the car, and it's really not shifting. The speedometer is reading, but not much. The output shaft does have a reading on it, but it's not what it should be. So what's going on as far as the reading goes, it's actually reading like a fourth. It's working, but it's actually reading like a fourth of what it should be reading. So for example, just say the output speed sensor should be reading 1000 RPM, it's reading 250. If the speedometer should be reading, 15, 16 miles an hour, it might be reading 4 miles an hour. It's like a quarter of what we see on the scan tool, or what we believe it should be is what we're reading on the scan tool. So, I mean, I kind of know what's going on with this thing already just from seeing that. And the first thing I did was, with the transmission in the trunk of the car, is I pulled the output speed sensor out of that and looked in there to see what it was reading. And it's actually reading, it's the incorrect transmission for the car. All right, so pretty much what they did was, being the fact that it was, I guess, an early 04 with no output speed sensor, with no input speed sensor, they got a transmission from a junkyard that's in 03. The speed sensor should be right here. I see this every once in a while on an 04, but it's probably very early 04. 100% they started with the input speed sensor. But this particular one, this is probably the second or third time I'm seeing this, does not have it. So, you know, I don't know if they went by the VIN number or how they went about getting the transmission, but they got the wrong one. They probably got an 03 transmission, because the ring gear in the back is the incorrect one to read the output speed sensor. So, and then I guess when it didn't work, they got another one of the same. It didn't work. When the third one went in, they got another one of the same. And, you know, the first thing I did was I pulled the sensor out and I said, yeah, we got the wrong unit. And another thing that I kind of knew right off the bat what was going on when he told me about the 720 code, and he told me it was in 04. And when I climbed under there and I saw it didn't have an input speed sensor, I looked around to make sure there was no connector, but there was no code for an input speed sensor. So I said, this is like, you know, like a kind of like a hybrid, you know, a mixture. Right before, it's maybe a late 03 or a very early 04, right before they started with the input speed sensor. And then what I did is I had the guy leave the car, then I again pulled the sensor out of the one in the trunk, which was the same unit, and sure enough, it had the 03 ring gear in there, not an 04 ring gear. All right, so we're gonna take this thing apart in the morning, and I have the, you know, ring gear that should be in there, but we'll take this thing apart and I'll show you what's in there, and then I'll show you what's supposed to be in there. And so we're not really just gonna be changing the part, because I don't, you know, this thing's a used transmission. I have no idea about mileage. I have no idea about history of the car. So I said, if you want me to fix it, we're doing an overhaul. I don't want to be responsible for taking this thing all the way down and then, you know, something happening down the road. So we're gonna do a complete overhaul with a guarantee and do it the way it should be done. All right, so tomorrow morning we're gonna chunk this thing down, and again I'll show you what the problem is and the part that's gonna go in to fix the problem. So again, we had a 720 code, and when you drive it, it really didn't shift, because when you're actually doing, you know, maybe 10 miles an hour or 15 miles an hour, the speedometer is only showing like 3. So it's not going to shift. It's not going to shift out of first because it thinks you're going too slow. And even the output RPM is a quarter of what it should be. So, but we'll open it up tomorrow morning, and I'll show you what's in there, and I'll show you what's supposed to be in there for an 04. But again, you know, it is an 04, and you know, you don't really see this. So the 2004 has the input speed sensor and the non-ferrous shell. So this has no input speed sensor, so it's going to have the steel shell. And we're going to put all that back the way it is. You're just going to change the one part. It should fit. The, you know, I called my rep and I was asking him about the Planet, and I was asking him, you know, 04 and up supposedly is different. And when I asked him what the difference was, I think one is maybe it's peen versus to welds. So I think it's going to work if we just change the rear ring gear to the correct one that is, you know, for a 2004. All right, so that is all for now. And I'm going to catch up with you guys in the morning. We're going to chunk this thing down. It's not going to take too long. We'll take a look at the rear ring gear. We'll take a look at the one supposed to be in there, and that's it. So I will see you guys in the morning. All right, back with you this morning. So let's start taking this apart. Get the bolts out of this neutral switch first. Get the output speed sensor out. All right, so that's the new one. All right, let's get this extension housing off. 10mm swivel for that.
looks nice and clean in here because this was the one in the car. Alright, so we're going to get these, see if we can get these pump bolts out, pull the pump out. Okay. Definitely an 03 tranny. Also 04 is going to have a molded piston instead of the aluminum one. Alright, so let's get the gasket. Alright, here's the rattle clip for the intermediate clutches. Now, I'm going to pull the front plate out. This piston is still in there. I'm just trying to get to the problem here to show you guys. So, let's do it. A little intermediate shaft, overdrive band. Let's get the hub out, bearing here. Okay, also the 04, but this one wouldn't have it. It takes the non-ferrous shell when it has the input speed sensor. So even if this was the correct tranny, it would still have this shell. Okay, sun gear. Alright, let's get the snap ring out. See if I can just... Now, okay. I'm going to take the center support snap ring out. Let's get the anti-rattles there. Okay, there's that. All right, get the center support out. Replan it. Actually, the only planet. Correct drum. Up. Reverse band, which is going to be changed. Got like a little spacer, snap ring, and the prop. All right, here it is a bearing. And it goes here. reposition. Give me 1 second. All right, so up to 03, this is where the output speed sensor reads. Where these little cutouts are, these little circles. Okay, so this is up to 03. Now 2004, it reads here. It reads these lugs. So you can see why it's reading a quarter of what it should be. So this is totally the wrong ring gear for this transmission. So we're going to basically just, we're doing an overhaul. I have a banner kit. I think it's up in the front. And we're going to put this back together with this ring gear. Okay, here is Planet. Planet should fit. Let's make sure. Yeah, it fits. Okay. And the sun gear here. Good. And the shell. Okay. All right. So that'll all be good. So that is the problem, and they kept putting the wrong transmission in the car, and then they eventually just put a speed sensor in, and that didn't do anything. So here is the problem. The output speed sensor was reading here when it's supposed to, you know, be reading like these lugs. All right, so there is the problem. So we'll just continue. We can just finish tearing this thing down here. Alright, the camera's down already. Just switch angles again. Lift it up here, back it out a little bit. Okay. Okay, no filter because we actually took the filter out when we had the pan down. Okay. There's the gasket. So actually what I did when I bought the banner kit is I bought an 03, a banner kit for an 03 instead of an 04. Pretty much the difference is the 04 banner kit comes with the molded piston for the intermediate clutch, and I had a feeling this was not going to have that, but if it did, I can always just get it separately. So I technically got the correct banner kit for the car. Okay. Take the harness off, hardwire harness as they call it. Where is, sometimes they can just pull these things up or come right out. All right, I don't want to break the tabs, so Okay, there's the hardwire harness. Those have a fairly high failure rate. All right, now I'm going to take all the 8mm bolts out, get the valve body out. And the EPC solenoid for 04 is the same as 03. All right, 05 to 08 is different, and 09 is not. So we're okay with that too. You know, being the fact that it's, you know, basically like an 03 transmission. Also could have been possibly evidence of some water in here at some point, because this is a used transmission. This I'm going to replace. There's a crack in it. That's going to be changed. Take the part package out. There's your spring. Pull the rod. Spring over here. Alright, now a little filter. At the moment. Okay, this is the accumulator and spring. You know, when you have, I just want to point out one thing here. When you have the valve body that does not have the tension plate here, I'm going to change this plate because the plate's always correct. You got to watch the height of this, because when it does have the plate, it's much shorter. And if you put the wrong one in, this may all come up too high and tear the seals on the third accumulator piston when it's returning. So just be careful, you know, just watch the height of this. Really early ones are much shorter because it has that tension plate, doesn't have to travel as far. So let's get the roll pin out. Let's get the large don't and take the linkage out. Okay. This will come right out. And I got a very thin 21mm. Okay. There's that. Linkage out. AC solenoid, we're gonna get it out of those. Okay, let me get my pliers here. Let me just make sure you guys can see. Let me pick it up a little bit. All right, so we're gonna get the 1-2 accumulator piston out. There's the snap ring. This cover is going to be changed. Springs. Piston's going to be changed. And there may have been water in this thing at one point, but who knows? It may have been sitting outside for a while. Okay, overdrive servo. So I got it started. Went back. Okay. Pretty tight. Going to be changed. Here's the spring, and also a new snap ring comes in the overhaul kits. Trans-Tech. All right, so the last one we got. Okay. Changed. And this piston also is going to be changed. This is typical is 3 groove, which this has. All right, so case is stripped. Get rid of this oil. We'll just take a look at the pump, clutch packs, and finish it up. All right, I'll be back in 2 minutes. Let's take a look at this reverse drum. All right, that looks good. No wrinkles there. All right, so snap ring most of the time pops out. All right, so I replaced this spiral lock. Like I think Sonic's has them, Superior has them. I use the Superior ones. So we're gonna get rid of that. This is the diode. Create one light, lock the other, so we'll take this. Alright. Alright, these are burnt anyway. But regardless, you know, this is a used transmission, so I would never reuse any frictions. And also this Belleville return spring is broken. Let me take that out and show you. Alright, so I'm gonna get in here, it's a real thick snap ring. Wavy. Okay, now let's try to get this thing out here. Gotta order a new one of these. And there we go. That's broken. Okay. And we got the spacer here. And the piston, which I'll get out there. Right, so we have a bearing between the two drums. Let's take a look at this. Okay. And they're not bad, but they are the kind of clutch that these flake off down to nothing. So these, you know, always replace these with the exits. Direct drum. Let's just see how the splines are here. And these splines do have wear to them, so I'm likely going to be putting a drum in. And we have to mark a drums are okay to use. Alright, not bad. Clutches don't look too bad, but they're getting changed anyway. Alright, so we're going to just bend the little tabs back here and pull the springs out, the return springs for the intermediate piston. Okay, take the piston out. And now let's get the 10mm bolts out, take a look at the pump. Good. Very nice. Pump looks good. Pump gears look nice. Okay. Looks good. Here is our problem. Get the snap ring out of here. That off. This. There's the correct one, the incorrect one. But again, I don't know much information on this. I asked if they had the original transmission, they didn't have it. They just had, you know, this one that was in the car, and the one that was in the trunk. And then I think the one previously, I don't know, maybe they gave it back to the yard, I'm not really sure. And then, when none of those worked, they put a brand new output speed sensor in, and that didn't work either. So, again, this is up to 03, this is 04 and up. So, pretty much they got the wrong trans in the car. right, so that is the deal where the output speed sensor reads between here and here. And again, it was reading, if you were doing 1,000 RPM, it was only reading about 250. So, you know, there's the difference with the spaces in between, and each reads each one of these as it goes by. So again, we got a 2004 Ford Expedition with the 4R70W. The two codes it had was a P0720, P0722 was not shifting. Speedometer, I mean, everything was working the way it should, but with the wrong piece in here, you know, the speedometer was, you would look like you were doing like 4 miles an hour when you were probably doing about 10 or 12. And it wasn't shifting at first. Occasionally it would, but for the most part it wasn't shifting. So we found the incorrect ring gear to read the output speed sensor, so I'm going to overhaul the trans, put the correct one in, and get it back in the car. So that is all for this. I thank you guys for watching. Have a great day, and we will see you next one.